Welcome to the course on the most devastating grief myths and how to combat them. Hi, I'm Diane Carbo, a registered nurse, care manager, and owner of caregiverrelief.com. If you are viewing this, you may be in the midst of one of the most painful experiences of your life. No one can know the depths of your pain. Loss and grief is one of the most trying experiences any human can possibly ignore. I know because I lost my mother at the age of 18 years old. And most recently, I lost my oldest son, a disabled vet, to suicide. He was 35 years old. If you are here because you've experienced the painful loss of a loved one, I would first like to say I'm so very sorry for your loss. During my healing journey, I did some work with Coach Fiona Livingwell, who also lost her 17-year-old daughter to a tragic car accident. After working with Fiona and experiencing the benefits of her very powerful course, we decided to collaborate and support others who are also suffering. And this is how the Afterlife Recovering from Grieving program was created. We have both been where you have been and want to help you to a healthy resolution to your grief. The first myth I would like to dispel is that there is closure, and in time things will return to normal. Let me do a simple demonstration that will help you understand. This sheet of paper is your life before the loss of your family member. And this is what happens to your life when you experience loss. You have feelings of pain, sorrow, anxiety, despair, frustration, guilt, and more. And this is your life as you heal from grief. You start to blossom into a new you. And as you can see from this paper, your life is not going to be the same. It will never be the same. The impact of loss and grief endures. We still have a relationship with that person. They are still a part of our life. And they are an integral part of who we are. And as you can see on this paper, there are creases and bumps. You can try to iron this paper and it will not return to the way it was. You are evolving into a new self. Your new self will develop new attitudes towards life, towards death, and towards spirituality, as well as towards your own life's meaning and purpose. You may find that others may have trouble with your changes. Explain to them that this change is a natural part of living. Our program will help you be open to new aspects of yourself coming alive. As you let yourself be changed, you will find that growth is possible. Developing a more open position towards your grief will enable you to live it more peacefully. And remember that after a death, love and loss go hand in hand. Closure on one would mean closure on the other. Love is a giving force in our world that we simply cannot live without. If you are a family caregiver that is dealing with the loss of a family member with dementia or a serious chronic medical condition, you may be experiencing what is known as anticipatory grief. I am very familiar with anticipatory grief. My mother was diagnosed with lung cancer when I was a senior in high school. And as the oldest of four, I felt I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. I took care of my mother as well as my younger brothers and sister. My father would not allow us any discussions on my mom's illness or our fear of losing her. Anticipatory grief is not unusual. So if you are caring for a family member with a chronic medical condition, you may start experiencing a sense of loss before they actually pass. You have anticipatory grief and still experience sudden death loss. Individuals who experience a sudden death often have feelings of anger and difficulty accepting the finality and the reality of their loss. A person that is experiencing anticipatory loss may take the opportunity, in their own way, to ask or offer forgiveness, or say, "I love you," "thank you," and even "goodbye." For some, it is a way to bring a relationship full circle and can make accepting the passing of their family member or loved one easier. While I did experience anticipatory grief as she battled lung cancer, I was not prepared for the death of my mother. My mom had just left the oncologist's office and was told she beat cancer. They gave her a clean bill of health. On the way down in the elevator, leaving the oncologist's office, my mom threw a pulmonary embolism and died that night. While I did experience anticipatory grief, I was not ready to come to terms with the reality and the finality of my mom's death. As a nurse, and having had so many experiences with death, dying, and hospice, I now understand there are times when family members feel as if they accept their family member person is dying. They are giving up on their loved one. But that's not so. Over the years, I've come to realize that anticipatory grief can be an opportunity to create a closer bond with your family member or loved one and bring the relationship to a completeness. Of course, the death of my oldest son was so unexpected and unbearably painful. It was not only a sudden and unexpected death, it was death by suicide. This fact alone brings so many more feelings and emotions with it. This is the final type of grief, known as complicated grief. I experienced complicated grief with the loss of my son. It is the final type of loss. But there are many different types of complicated grief. Disenfranchised grief is a grief that cannot be acknowledged. This may include situations when a relationship cannot be or is not acknowledged. This may be due to a miscarriage or loss of a gay partner. Many marginalize the importance of a pet in our lives. The loss of the pet we loved and cared for is devastating for many. Another example of disenfranchised grief would be when death has negative connotations, such as in suicide or a person dying from AIDS or Ebola. Ambiguous loss is under the disenfranchised grief category. This is a type of grief that is getting more and more attention. This is the loss when the person is physically present but not present psychologically. Examples are those caring for someone with dementia or traumatic brain injury or chronic illnesses, such as alcoholism, or parents that are workaholics. Complicated grief is when the grieving process does not progress over time as it should. The intensity and feelings and length of time is severe and prolonged and interferes with your ability to function. You may fall into a true depression or develop an anxiety disorder. Many people know that when they are stuck in a grief that will not resolve. Complicated grief usually will not resolve on its own and requires the help of a professional to resolve it. I have learned over time that feelings of loss and grief are universal. No matter what, we all feel as if no one understands our pain and suffering. I've developed a list of normal but disturbing feelings of grief. You may experience some of these on the recovery from your grief. A constant fog over your thinking, memory and concentration problems, trouble keeping track of belongings, fatigue, muscle pain, headaches, stomach trouble, and or chest pain, lack of motivation or initiative, inability to perform usual functions, irritability, mood swings, anxiety, fear of performing even familiar activities, feeling hyped up, wired, exaggerated startle response, feeling disoriented, having nightmares or trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, experiencing unpredictable bouts of crying, avoiding friends and family or hiding out, feeling despair, fears about a desolate future, feelings of helplessness. You may have appetite changes, constant yearning or pining for what you have lost, sighing repeatedly, feelings of regret and guilt, feeling visited by a lost loved one, having a change in your sexual interest, idealizing or waiting for the return of a loved one. Here are some warning signs when you need to get help. When you have serious or persistent thoughts or are actually planning suicide. When high anxiety leaves you non-functional. Depression. It's normal to feel sad at the death of a loved one or a family member, but a complicated or prolonged bereavement may lead to true clinical depression. For those with suicidal thoughts, you need to get help immediately. Have a friend drive you to the hospital or dial 911. For extreme anxiety or clinical depression, you will need professional help and possibly medication. Other support systems may be necessary: online support groups and forums, local support groups, especially those who have lost a child or grief from suicide. Every day I work with people that lose a family member. It doesn't matter if the family member is young or 100 years old. So many of my clients have been candid and shared such heartfelt experiences. I'm always reminded of how resilient we are. You may be a person who would never seek professional help or lean on a support group or even cry on the shoulder of a trusted friend. You ignore or stuff your feelings deep inside you. I have a demonstration for you. Now we're going to have a little bit of fun with ping pong balls, water, and this could get a little messy. If you do this at home, roll up your sleeves, because I have. This experiment will demonstrate how it's impossible to control your thoughts every minute of every day. You'll need a bowl and about a dozen ping pong balls. As you can see, I have written on each of the ping pong balls a feeling: loneliness, sadness, regret, sorrow, denial, anger, resentment. The list goes on and on. Half fill a bowl with water and place the balls in it. Notice how they float to the surface of the water. Now think of as many ways as you can to keep all the balls under the water on the bottom of the bowl. Now using both your hands, push them to the bottom of the bowl. See if you can hold the balls down with one hand. Now try with one finger. Trying to control your thoughts and emotions is like attempting to control the balls. You may notice that no matter what they did, they kept coming to the surface. The difficulty was keeping them at the bottom of the bowl. These balls represent your thoughts and emotions. Suppressing them just doesn't work long term. Eventually, they will come to the top. This little experiment is a good visual demonstration about suppressing your thoughts doesn't really work. Quite often, people give us advice when we're suffering, especially in relation to our loved ones that have passed, saying things like, "Just don't think about it," or "Isn't it time you've moved on?" But as we have seen, by pushing the thoughts away or attempting to suppress them in your mind, you will keep coming back to the same unhelpful thoughts. Thinking that you can control your unhelpful thoughts and emotions by avoiding them or ignoring them is just simply naive, and it's just simply not possible. If you allow them, your suppressed emotions will take up all your time and energy, and they will in the long run have a massive impact on your overall well-being. We try not to think about something. We find that's all we can think about. We can feel like we have failed in our effort to keep those unhelpful thoughts and emotions at bay, which is impossible because they keep coming back time and time again, leaving us feeling silly for feeling this way. Then we will experience stronger thoughts that imply that we are defective or weak-minded. I know I felt this way. The Afterlife Recovering from Grieving program addresses the issues you face in a grief and offers solutions and strategies to help a healthy resolution towards healing. Many strategies like positive thinking, distraction, avoidance might decrease unhelpful thoughts in the short term, but actually will lower quality of life in the long term. For me, my quality of life was affected. I felt alone, exhausted, and unwell. So many times I heard, "You should be over these feelings." To be honest, I really thought I was going crazy. You will find that grief sneaks into every aspect of your life. It is by far the closest to crazy you are ever going to get. Grief takes you hostage, then releases you, only to do it all over again. It is unpredictable and inconsistent. I think it may help you to know that grief is a process, a long journey of acceptance and healing. With time and support, you can recover stronger than before. Many hear about the stages of grief. This is a myth. There are many feelings that are common to people in grief, such as numbness or disbelief. But anger is not a universal feeling in the grief process. In fact, many feel relief that death took their loved one. They were out of their pain and suffering. Stages of grief give the sense that time heals all wounds. Time does not heal emotional wounds. But you can learn strategies to restore balance and find courage to create a new and healthier future for yourself. For many, grief was just too personal and painful to share openly. But grief is not something that you go through alone. Grief is feelings of loss over connection we had in our life. Without attachments in our lives, we would not feel grief. You need people in your life to move forward towards resolution. Reach out to friends. Look for others that have had similar experiences to you. Trying to do it alone will only delay your healing process. I learned with the death of my mother, and then most recently with the loss of my oldest son, people avoid you because they just don't know what to say to you. They are very uncomfortable with your feelings of grief and just want it to go away as soon as possible. That's why so many attempt to comfort you and give you advice. They encourage you to get over it and get on with your life as soon as possible. What they feel is comfort is just insensitive. No one can tell you they know how you feel. When we are in pain, there is nothing more soothing than a comforting, compassionate voice. If anything I touched on you today is something you have felt or experienced, I want you to know there is help for you. I found it, and I want to share it with you. And you can get through it and come back in time to a happy and productive life. I know it's hard for you to believe right now, at this moment, but you must hold on to hope and keep in the back of your mind that things will eventually get better. Grieving is a process when we reassemble our life piece by piece until it starts to make sense to us again. The Afterlife Recovering from Grief program was developed so that we will take you step by step through a healthy grieving process. As I've told you before, I have been there. I want to help others so they do not go through what I went through. In my next video, I want to share some strategies and techniques for you that will help to guide you through your heartbreak and despair and lighten your present burden. I will help you to learn to embrace hope, experience joy, and return to life once again. But before you go, please scroll down to the end of this and you'll see a Facebook like and a share button. And you know how we all like to be liked. Then scroll down further and leave me a comment. What you think and what you want to share with me is important to me.